Welcome everyone to the Lofi Podcast. Today, my guest is Alcinous. Welcome.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. You've been such a great supporter of the podcast for the past couple of months, and your kind messages have been just fantastic to read. So it's great to actually have you on, and we can talk lo-fi music and whatever else this conversation holds.
It sounds good to me. When I saw your message, I woke up to you saying, "Hey, I think you should be on the pod." I was secretly very excited. So I was like, "Yes, he asked me."
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. So, just to get started then, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are outside of lo-fi, who is behind this name, Alcinous?
Sure. So, first off, I picked the name Alcinous. Looking back, I probably should have picked something that was easier to spell and say. But I was actually reading the Odyssey, the Iliad and the Odyssey back to back, and it was one of the characters' names in there. So that's how I ended up on the name Alcinous. But my real name is Zach. I'm just a musician from Florida, and I have been playing music really most of my life, ever since I picked up a guitar around 13 years old. And it was only until recently that I started making lo-fi. Around the very tail end of 2022 is when I first made a beat in Pro Tools, and I quickly discovered that Pro Tools wasn't as fun as Ableton looked on the tutorials, so I switched to that. And ever since that, it was just it's just been full speed ahead in terms of making lo-fi all the time. And I'm so happy I discovered the genre, because it's really changed my life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's funny how you mentioned you picked up guitar around 13. Like, it seems to be that kind of age that so many people start to pick up an instrument and sort of gain an interest in music. Was that your start of your musical journey with picking up guitar, or like how did you get into music?
Absolutely. So funny enough, I had been gifted a 3/4 size Fender Stratocaster, the tiny version that a lot of kids have, and it just sat in my closet for years. I never played it. And then fast forward to around 11, 12, we actually got the video game Rock Band. I don't know if it was like the offshoot Guitar Hero, but it had the drums and the singing. And I got really good at playing the guitar in this video game. To which my father started teasing me. He's like, you have this real guitar in the closet. I bet you couldn't play that. Because I was doing like the toy guitar behind my head, like Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. And so I actually took his words as a little bit of a challenge, and I picked up the real guitar and just kind of became obsessed with it. I started taking lessons, and I had this amp which actually had a bunch of backing tracks that just looped forever, which, looking back now, learning to solo over those loops just for hours on end really got me to where I am, to being able to solo like I can today. So that's kind of how I got my start with playing guitar, off of a silly video game.
Yeah. Actually, that sounds exactly like whenever I started guitar too. Not so much in the video game side of things, but in terms of soloing over loops. Because I remember I started off just with a little 3/4 size classical guitar, just with nylon strings, and it sounded terrible. But, one day I was 14, I think, and I decided that, what? I've saved up a bit of money. I'm going to buy an electric guitar. And so it was just a rabbit hole from there. Whenever you find out that amps and pedals are a thing, all of your pocket money that you save up goes into that.
Yes, absolutely. My closet is filled with guitars that I bought around that age, and now that I gig and I record and I only play two, my acoustic and my electric, they're just sitting there. I'm like, well, how do I get rid of these things? But
yeah,
yep. All my amps are in the box now too. I have all these hardware amps I don't use because I just use the plugins, which is just how technology progresses, I guess. But
exactly, that's the way it is. Because I'm literally behind this camera I'm looking at here. I can see my little Marshall sitting there, and I haven't switched it on in years. And it just sits there sad in the corner. You feel sorry for it.
Exactly, right? But that I think that's fine. Hobbies change, and we go from hardware to software, and that's just the natural progression of things, I think.
Yeah, so like I heard that you then started getting into gigging and stuff from learning your guitar and developing from that. And so sort of how did that get to be?
Yeah, so I guess the course of action I took was I started taking lessons, and then I couldn't really sing, but I was like, well, if I want to get gigs, kind of I see, I live in Florida, so at least at that time, everywhere had live music, especially on the beach bars and stuff like that. I would see guys playing with an acoustic guitar singing Jimmy Buffett covers, and I would be like, I want to do that. I want to be the guy singing Margaritaville to the tourists. So I needed to learn to sing. I started taking vocal lessons, got an acoustic guitar, and I was very lucky too. Very young, I found a mentor who was already a local gigging musician, and he pretty much took me under his wing and let me sit in with him on his gigs. He would let me, sing every couple songs, but mostly just providing like lead guitars and stuff like that, which also helped a lot for learning how to solo and not be. He was very big on not being too busy because when you're young, you want to play as fast as you can and as many notes as you can, and that was those lessons of just filling in the spots you need to with the guitar actually translates super well to lo-fi because we if I try to shred on my guitar, it's going to kind of break the listener's immersion of these soft gentle beats we're making. But yeah, so then I started branching out and getting my own gigs, and I did have a band for a while. We were an all-kid band. We were called Out by Nine because by law we had to be out of the bars by 9 p.m. And but I fell in love with doing solo gigs just because the only person I have to worry about was myself. I'm the only one who has to show up on time and load in, not worry about any band drama. Not that there was or anything, but it's just easier. You know what I mean? And ever since then, I've just been gigging full time. And I'm proud to say that actually playing gigs has been the only job I've ever had to work. So I've actually been a full-time musician my entire life, working life.
Wow, that's amazing to hear because it's the dream of so many people to be a full-time musician, and to hear that you from the start being able to make your living from music, it's almost like the goal that so many of us as producers have.
Yeah. I'm super fortunate, and I think anyone could do it. I really think that I'm not special, like in that, like my voice isn't like I don't know Mariah Carey, like doing crazy runs, or I'm not Stevie Ray Vaughan on the guitar. I'm just very professional in how I treat it. Like I've only ever been late to one gig ever, and that was like 4th of July traffic on the beach, so I had an excuse. But after I've lost count of how many gigs I've done, but it's got to be over 3,000 at this point. I've yeah, I have sang Wonderwall that many times. Um, but yeah, I think it's just treating it like a job and being nice to people and showing up when you say you're going to show up and doing a good job. And I think that just goes really far in terms of being able to do it full time.
Yeah, I totally agree because like having that sense of just honesty around you and that sense of discipline as well, it can take you so far because if you say you're going to turn up and then you don't for half an hour in comparison to turning up early and being ready, like it gives off an image of who you are. And so through that you can build contacts, people see you as a reliable individual.
Exactly, exactly. And also not playing too loud. Turning down when you're asked is a big skill to have.
Yeah, no, especially as young musicians, yeah, I think there's times that we definitely played far too loud.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we've heard your story that you've started with guitar, you got into gigging and so on. And so you briefly mentioned at the beginning that it was the late 2022 you started to try to make some beats, was it?
Yeah, yeah. If I'm pretty sure it was like around Christmas time of the very end of 2022, because like everyone else around that period of time, especially when we were locked down and stuff like that, I was just scrolling on YouTube and I saw this studying anime girl with a cat on her windowsill, and I said, "What is that?" And it says "Lo-fi beats to chill/study to," and I started listening to lo-fi a lot. That was my initial exposure, and yeah, I was listening to it for at least 2 years, and then I don't know whatever happened. One day I was like, I wonder if I could make that. I make music, and I never really had made a lot in the DAW. I knew my way around Pro Tools, but it was never really like fun. And I think it was because a couple of reasons. I was trying to make more like vocal music. And also, I just don't think, no shade against Pro Tools, I just don't think it's really designed as much for someone who makes a lot of music. I guess it's more for mixing. That's an opinion, I get it. But, I made my first beat, and I was like, okay, this is fun. And then I discovered like, there's an artist. He was one of my favorite lo-fi artists called Sleepy Fish, and one of my favorite songs ever is like "I Wish It Would Never Stop Snowing" or something. But he has videos on YouTube, which are all of his music production streams, and they're like maybe 6 or 7 of them, and they're 3 hours long. And I learned Ableton through watching these videos, as well as like making lo-fi, and that was really the beginning of like, okay, I can do this. I got Ableton, and I started making music like every day, and started just really piling up the beats. And I would say around mid 2023 is when I really started taking lo-fi like, okay, this is what I do now. I am a lo-fi musician. Started working with labels and collaborating, and really just diving in head first and learning how everything works. And I'm so happy I did.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think so many people's first experience of lo-fi was definitely through Lo-Fi Girl. And like through the lockdown, so many people were scrolling on YouTube, and I was the same. I actually saw this stream. I saw this Lo-Fi Girl. I saw this cat, and I was like, this stream has a lot of views, and it's been streaming for the past couple of months. I wonder what this is.
Exactly.
So you click on it, and then you're just exposed to the genre of music that you really weren't aware of before, because it's so niche. Because I don't think there's that many people who would actively listen to lo-fi. So if you speak to people, what music genres do you like? They're always going to say pop, rock, hip hop, but nobody says lo-fi. So like, but whenever you do get into it, you see there's this whole community behind it that you were oblivious of for so long.
Exactly. And it's funny you touch on that, because when people ask like, well, what kind of music do you make? I really have to be like, if I answer lo-fi, a lot of times they won't know. So I like to say I make modern day Muzak, which, I put the Zach in Muzak because my name being Zach. But yeah, so if they're younger and hip, I can usually say lo-fi, but especially in Florida, we have a lot of elderly people. I'll just say I make elevator music.
Yeah, elevator. That's one way to put it. Yeah. Because often whenever I get asked about what kind of music I produce, I end up saying that, well, I start my answer with saying, well, have you heard of lo-fi before? And 9 times out of 10, I'll be replied to with no. So, I'll then have to come up with an explanation, something like, well, yeah, it's chill background coffee shop music, and then from that, they sort of get an idea of what it is. But as you say, if they're young and hip, they get it.
So. Yes, right away. And then I can usually say, my dentist plays me as their please hold music, so I'm that guy, please hold, and then I play. So,
well, yeah. So, but whenever we look at producing lo-fi as well, you have a really good sense of work ethic as well, and discipline that you mentioned. You said that about gigging, but also you have that whenever you produce your lo-fi, and that you sort of have the mentality of sitting down and getting music made. Like how do you think that this helps in your production style? Because like I know a lot of people, they'll not do anything until sort of the creative spark goes off, and then they'll produce for a week and then not do anything for a month again. But you're slightly different.
Yeah, and I think it makes all of the difference. And like I said, I don't think I'm special in this regard. I think I've just kind of rewired the way I think about it, because as creatives, a lot of times I think we do wait for that creative spark. We're like, oh, well, once I feel creative or inspired, then I'll sit down at the DAW and then I'll make music. Whereas if you turn that around and say, well, how about I start out by sitting down at the DAW, turning it on and just fiddling around, then I'll get inspired and then I'll make, you know what I mean? And I have not read this book, but there is an entire book called The War of Art where I believe that is the whole thesis. So that could be helpful for some. But yeah, it's never been an issue for me. I just like to sit down at my desk here and turn on Ableton and just start with a piano idea or, grab my guitar. I rarely start with drums. If I'm feeling extra spicy, I'll start with drums. But in this, I make a lot of sleepy beats, so usually the drums aren't super inspiring. But yeah, usually just lay down something, and it's very free flowing. I never really have to deal with creative block when doing it this way, which I'm thankful for. But yeah, producing for me is an everyday thing. I rarely take days off, and if I do, it's annoying. Like I will go to bed, be like, wow, I'm upset that I did not make music today.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at things, because I do have to say that of late in my own personal life, I've been extremely busy just with academia and things like that. And so getting the chance to come up with music ideas and let that creative spark flow before I sit down to the DAW is quite difficult, because there's so much in my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that just in that maybe an hour and a half I have in the evening after I finished all I need to do with the day, that if I just force myself to sit down, open up Logic, because that's what I use,
Yeah.
and just start to play an instrument, those ideas do begin to flow. And then it's almost as if you get into a flow state and one thing comes after another. And by the end of it, you have half of a track made.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. So maybe sometimes as artists, we can actually be the creative block ourselves by just not sitting down and getting to work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess I do recognize my privilege a little bit in that, I don't have to work a 9 to 5 being a full-time musician already. My schedule is pretty lax, so I do have a lot more time. However, someone such as yourself who's studying, or someone who is working a job, if you can find that hour in the evening or whenever, I think it is almost like treating it like going to the gym. If you can find that time, it's totally worth it. And yeah, when you find that flow state, like you said, I mean, there'll be so many times where I sit down and it's, 10 a.m. and I make a track and I'm like, oh, it's time for lunch already. That was very fast.
Yeah, I know. It's almost as if, you're like a child playing, having fun. All of a sudden, time flies. It goes. It disappears. And it's almost as, even though you're an adult, you're still returning to that childlike state of, it's hard to explain, but you're almost that creativity that you once had when you were a child, imagining playing with your toys, coming up with all these scenarios. You're just bundling it up and letting it out in a different way, but with instruments.
I love that. As a Lego kid myself, it brings me back to like building with the Legos. Except this, at the end of it, you have something to show for it, I guess. You have a a song that's yours forever.
That's true. And well, yeah, I have to admit, I was a Lego kid myself too. That was the only toy I played with.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I know. If it was my birthday or if it was Christmas and the little gift that was wrapped in front of me didn't make that Lego shaking sound, I was disappointed.
You put it back under the tree.
Yeah, that's the way it was. To hear that rattle of plastic bricks if it wasn't there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, so you like being a full-time musician though. You mentioned that you don't have that 9 to 5, but like, do you find that this differs and changes the way that you approach music? Maybe that you have more time for it.
Yeah, so I find that being a full-time musician, I'm very lucky in that, you hear a lot of other gigging musicians and they are very jaded and they hate the songs they play because they've sang them 3,000 times. But I don't know, like I'm still not tired of Wonderwall. I still love singing Margaritaville, like it's just, they're just good songs. And, I treat my gigs like I like to play to the crowd that's there. I could sit in the corner and play my sad, guilty pleasures that nobody knows and make everybody bummed out. But well, first I wouldn't get invited back, and also it wouldn't really be a good vibe. I'm there to bring a good vibe, and I just like being the glue that kind of makes the room a better place to be in, I guess, for the 3 hours that I'm singing. But also you asked being a full-time musician, how that affects like my process, I suppose. Like I don't find the burnout. And I think, going back to, I have a looper at my gigs, and that also like, growing up, I would just play over these loops forever and ever. And, at my gigs, it's mostly muscle memory. So it's funny, if I actively think of the songs I'm singing, I will mess up the lyrics. So I am actually on autopilot. So I've just done it so much. So at my gigs, I'll actually be watching a hockey game, like on TV, like while I'm singing. And it's funny because like, I'll be collaborating with somebody, and I'll be like having a conversation like we are as we're doing a take. Like as I'm recording my solos, like most of the time I am heavily distracted, and they actually come out way better than if I'm like really focusing on them. So I know I just kind of went all over the place with that answer there, but
Yeah. No, but it is interesting what you said, in that maybe we focus too much in what we make, and that focus ends up becoming a distraction because we're just trying to make everything so perfect. We're thinking, what's next? What's coming up next? I need to make it absolutely 10 out of 10. And that actually ends up with us making it worse than it could have been if we just let the thing flow.
the hardest solos I have to record are like the 2-note solos that I have to really like, the simplest thing that for whatever reason, if I'm just like really thinking about it, it'll take 10 takes, and I'll talk to myself and be like, oh, Zach, is it your first day playing guitar? No, like it's just, I'm thinking about it too hard. Whereas if you just go into that place where you're just kind of just going on autopilot, you're in that flow state, it'll just happen. At least it does for me.
Yeah, no, well, that actually happens with me too. Like times I would have friends over and we'd be all together sitting around my desk, and I'd be sitting playing the guitar. I have a vivid memory of this summer where I had two friends over. The three of us were making a song for fun, and I was focusing so hard on to record a good take of this guitar solo.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started chatting. We just hit record, and I was playing the guitar. And all of a sudden, that was the best take there was. It sounded perfect. Every note was correct. And I was like, what just happened,
Yeah.
Because if just taking away that whole, man, English is failing me now, but that idea of everything needs to be perfect actually maybe will make it perfect.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of my best takes are when I'm literally watching SpongeBob in the background.
Yeah. So actually, that's a great segue into the next question, because you mentioned SpongeBob. How is us? how is us as producers? Maybe how could we be a sponge in that we can learn as much as we can about our craft? Because you mentioned watching lo-fi tutorials on YouTube, things like that. How can we soak in all of this information and help us be a better musician?
Well, first off, that was probably the best segue I've ever heard. I thought we were about to go into SpongeBob trivia, which, I would be perfect at, but, that's for the next episode. But, I really think, like, when I first started in around 2023, if I got my dates right, I became obsessed with, like, I wanted to find out who's who in lo-fi, like, who are the biggest artists. I found out record labels were a thing in this space. I'm like, who are the biggest labels? What are the playlists? And I found that, if you just go on YouTube and you type in lo-fi music tutorial, like the ones that pop up first, I'm not going to say they're not helpful, but they're mostly like, just play a minor seventh chord. Now it's lo-fi. Like, okay, like I went a little deeper than that, right? And I found that, like, if you, listen to your favorite lo-fi producers and you went and typed in their name on YouTube, like a good amount of time that they would have their own tutorials on there. And so now you're learning right from the people who are actually doing it, not from a YouTuber who's just trying to recreate the genre, right? And, I would find as many of these tutorials as I could, pick up what I could. I mentioned those Sleepy Fish streams. I think anyone getting into the genre, even if it is more like chill hoppy, maybe you want to be more sleepy or whatever. Like I think that is where everyone should start. Just because it's hours and hours worth of someone just working in Ableton. You learn stuff from like what settings they use, like how to come up with ideas, and you can see him working through the ideas. But also not just videos, like, Discord is huge in lo-fi. And, the Discord's popularity for each label or space or whatever, they come and go. But, you can search from chats from like 2021, 2022 of like some producers who are, huge in the space now, and just like learn about what they were talking about, even if it's nonsense, I guess. But sometimes there's some goodies, like, what labels they were working with them, or how they got playlisted, or how they got certain opportunities with their music. So I really think just becoming obsessed in like just being a bit of an internet sleuth is very helpful, not only in lo-fi, but I guess really any hobby you'd want to get into. Because when you can search a little deeper than just like going to the front page of YouTube or the lo-fi hip hop on Reddit or whatever, you learn a lot. And but I think even more so than just being terminally online in the lo-fi space, I guess, is actually finding like collaborators. And if you can find like a collaborator like in real life, like that makes all the difference. Like I recently found out my friend Josh, who also makes lo-fi, he lives about 45 minutes from me by car. And so, now we actually meet up and make beats in real life. And the first time we ever made music together, I'm like, wow, this is really weird. Like something I've only ever done online. Like now I'm doing with a real person.
Yeah, like, because I've never actually made lo-fi beats with other producers in person. Unfortunately, I kind of live in an area of the world where the main genre of music is country and rock. So yeah, but even then, I have a few friends that we meet up and make music together, although it mightn't be lo-fi.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a certain connection that you build with those people whenever you're making it together in the same room with the same DAW open in front of you. And there's a certain like joy that you get out of making music together with other people that
Absolutely.
it's not the same as whenever you're doing it online collaborating, but instead whenever you're with that person, you're sharing the same energy. The whole room is just filled with that creativity, and it's hard to explain in words until you actually experience it.
Yeah, it's I think you're spot on about that. I mean, just it's like modern day jamming, but now you're recording it.
Yeah. Mhm. You're recording it, and then it might go out into the world someday and it'll become a massive hit.
Exactly.
So you mentioned also in some conversations that we had over text that you went to college for music business as well. Like, how did you find that?
I did. So I went to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. And originally, it's funny how things change, but back then I actually wanted to be like a country singer, like a pop country guy. Yeah, that never panned out, but I still ended up going to Belmont, and I went for music business, and I do think it was really helpful just to be surrounded by, well, I guess other like-minded individuals, but also just like learning about all of the different royalties that there are, and like it's a vastly complicated world, as I'm sure but like when it's fun to it's always a fun party trick to explain to someone who's not a musician, like, oh well, when my song gets streamed, I don't get one royalty, I actually get like 5, but it's on me to claim them all, otherwise they go into a big pool that is given to the majors, or however they do it, you know what I mean? So I am I guess passionate's a strong word, but I'm very interested in like figuring out how to register all my works properly and get it to where I'm at least getting as much as I can by registering them myself and stuff like that, and leaving as little on the table as I can, I guess, which is a fun fun. It's a process. It is actually, I don't know, it is kind of fun. Like I have a big spreadsheet, with all of my songs, and I go through my contracts. I actually read my contracts. And I see what I can claim and what I can't claim, and I put a little X when I do it, get the little happy brain chemical boost, and yeah.
Yeah, no, as you say, it's so complicated, and especially for people just getting into producing and releasing their own music, it can seem quite overwhelming, actually.
Yes.
Um, so, like, would you have any tips or little bits of wisdom for folk who are just getting into the music scene?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here. I guess that wouldn't be very exciting if I just like, well, you should register with ASCAP and then this and that. I mean, like, I think there's plenty of tutorials who could explain it better than I. Of like, the breakdown of a song, right? Of when it gets played, there's the mechanical, and then there's the the publishing and the this and the that. I recently did, I felt helpful because in the Discord there's a lo-fi chat where I mentioned something about sound exchange, and there was actually lots of producers who I would rank pretty high in the space who were like, oh well, could you actually explain this a little further? Like, we don't know how sound exchange works. So I'm like, oh yay, I'm helping. But yeah, I think if you just really take some time, you don't need to go to get a 4-year degree to learn it. You just go to the school of YouTube and really like just kind of figure out one thing at a time. Like, okay, I've released the song. Now maybe I should look into getting a PRO. And that shouldn't be too difficult to set up. And once you register all your songs with that, you're like, okay, well, I've done that. Now maybe I should look into neighboring rights in the U.S. That's Sound Exchange, and it's whatever it is around the world in your country. But yeah, I think really just like keeping it simple, taking it one step at a time, and actually reading your contracts and knowing what you can, and not being afraid to ask. Like there's been situations where I'll just send the label a DM, and everyone in lo-fi is so friendly. It's I've never been like, how dare you ask? Like, you're silly for not knowing that.
Yeah, I know there's so much that people might want to ask, but they just don't have the courage to do so. And I think, yeah, we need to remember the words that probably every one of us were told when we were younger, and that there's no such thing as a silly question. Because every question is genuine, because we have something that we don't understand, something that we want to know more about, and it never hurts to ask more about it.
And I can tell you one thing I've learned in doing this is that we're all just people trying to figure it out. Even if you're talking to someone like who runs a huge lo-fi label, at the end of the day, they're just a person figuring out themselves too. You know what I mean? So it really exposes the humanity in all this, that we're just we no one really knows, but we're all doing our best.
Yeah, I know, it's so true, because like we might try to put on the image that we've got everything sorted out and we know all about this, but in reality, a lot of us are just all in the same boat, and that we're trying to take everything in, just as you said, one step at a time.
Exactly. And anyone who says they have it all figured out, I would run as fast as you can, because they're trying to sell you something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anyone that's got everything perfectly sorted out. And yeah, as you say, if they do, just stay a couple of steps away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, here, before we wrap up, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your goals with lo-fi, because I heard that you have a plan to move to Portugal, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so this is coming from your music business. You're doing this all yourself, working up to this final goal. And
Mhm.
so, could you just tell us a little bit about this, where it came from? Like, it's so fascinating to hear.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to. So, yeah, me and my girlfriend are moving to Portugal, and she's already an EU citizen. So for her, it's very easy. But, for me as an American, I have to get a visa in order to, legally live there. And Portugal has a passive income visa, which actually accepts music royalties as one of the ways that you can prove your income. And so I found out about that maybe, around the same time I started making lo-fi. So from the beginning, it's actually been the goal, like make as much quality music as I can and like build up lo-fi to be where I can actually use it to move to another country, which I think is just having that singular goal has been so helpful because in the moments of like maybe not feeling inspired or maybe not wanting to sit behind the DAW is like, well, every day you don't work towards this goal is another day that is going to stay farther away. So yeah, I as of right now we are planning our move next year around like April or May. I can't give like a solid date, but it's coming up. It's actually to the point where like I'm decluttering and getting rid of stuff, and yeah, so it's becoming more real every day, and it's complicated. It's not like you just buy a plane ticket. There's a lot of bureaucracy and getting background checks and meetings and this and that and waiting. Hurry up and wait. So yeah, it's really exciting, and I can't wait. There are a couple lo-fi producers who are in Portugal too, so there's quite a little lo-fi community already there, which I'm excited to be entering.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And in terms of like in-person collaborations, like you don't know what the future holds there.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the start of a new chapter. It's big and scary, and but I'm really proud to say that lo-fi has really been I'm able to do this from music still. Like I guess it just continues on. Like my whole life has just been music and doing it full time, and the fact that it can allow me to do this is I'm very proud of, and I think it just goes to show if you put your mind towards anything and you work hard and you're consistent at it, you can really achieve the things you set out to do.
Yeah, no, it's such an encouragement to hear things like that and stories like yours, and that you have this goal, and if we have this goal and we work towards it, the sky's the limit. It's crazy what a bit of dedication and discipline can do. And I'm preaching to myself when I say that. I just need to sit down sometimes and realize that we just got to do it. We got to get on and soldier on each and every day.
Yep, absolutely. And you're gonna have to come visit me.
Man, absolutely. Portugal's a lot closer to me here than the States is. So, and
yep.
flight tickets are surprisingly cheap actually, because it's all close in Europe. So I'd be up for it.
Yeah, it is funny. Like, lo-fi is such a, it's worldwide, but there's so many producers who are based in Europe that moving will actually, like, I'll be closer in time zones to everybody and, not sending them DMs about collabs and stems at their time, 2 a.m. So I'll be annoying less people.
That's true. Yeah. But here, before we wrap up, are there any last sort of final words of wisdom you'd like to share with the lo-fi community? Because I'm sure you have many stored in there.
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to ask for help. Like I talked about earlier, we're all just trying to figure it out. Find a mentor if you can, like I found with gigging, like I've also found with lo-fi as well. Find people who are a few steps ahead, but also don't be afraid to give back too. If you find yourself a few steps ahead of someone else, impart your wisdom on them. And I think lo-fi is awesome because as a community, we are like 0% toxic. Like everyone is so awesome. And that is so rare. Like I don't think we understand how lucky we have it. Like everyone is so friendly. Like it is unbelievable. So yeah, like just ask for help, collaborate, and learn from others. And I think you'll be on your way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, here, Alcinous, thank you so much for this interview. It's been fantastic speaking to you, hearing your story, and it's such an inspiration just to hear how much has happened with you in the past couple of years with music and even beforehand in your gigging history. So all the best, and listen, I wish you every bit of luck with your future and moving to Portugal. So...
Well, thank you for having me. This was fantastic. And like I said, we'll have to meet up for a cerveja and a pastel de nata once I'm there.
I'd be definitely up for that. Well, here.
All right.
All the best.
All right. Cheers.